One thing that in our mission experience in Thailand that was a challenge and an unusual and an experience in our lives that we probably never would have had otherwise was in 1979 when the Cambodian refugees started coming across the border. There were several camps set up. One of them was pretty close to where we had a church and all, but the other was down at the lower end of Jantabri province, down in the southeastern part of Thailand. Well, since Maxine, my wife, was a Baptist press rep, they sent word, we want you to cover this story. We want you to know about what our volunteer medical teams are doing, because we had folks getting ready to come out and help care for the refugees. There was so much malaria and other diseases. I think the U.S. Army said that area coming across there was one of the highest malaria areas in the world. But anyhow, Maxine, the two of us, I went with her, and we went to the camp, at one particular camp, several times. The Vietnam place where they were staying was close by, so she spent time there. She observed and wrote about it and interviewed a lot of the refugees. That was part of her learning process, both the Cambodians and the Vietnamese. The first time we went down to the camp, we had a wonderful surprise. There, I might cry about this, there was one of our MK girls working in the lab. And I was so happy to see her. She was like one of our own kids, you know. So that was a special treat that we didn't know we were going to get to have. But anyhow, so Maxine, we were there. She talked to some patients in we called it a hospital, and it was kind of a thatched roof, open building. And Penny Shelton was busy checking the blood and all those things to try to figure out what to do for them. While we were there, I think it was our first time, because we went several times. This covered several years during that whole time, but I'm trying to remember what was so special about the first one, extra special besides Penny. I remember they had a group of Cambodians, this is a little bit later, but we had a whole big bunch of Cambodian soldiers. They were whatever they called not the Viet Cong, the Khmer Rouge. They came across one day. Now this was several miles away from the camp and the hospital, but we heard that they got where they were coming, so we were down there with the medical team, and there was about 5,000. They came across with their black pajamas on and their caps, and the border between Thailand and Cambodia was just a little ditch, I remember. There were some Thai soldiers along there, but they let them come across. They laid down their rifles and came on in. And they'd been in the jungle for many days, and they told these horrific stories about the fact that they were being pursued by the Vietnam soldiers. And I don't know how many, but some of their babies they had to actually put to death because they were crying and giving away the location of their camp. Well, when we heard this, I know Maxine couldn't hardly take it. I mean, it was terrible, but that was the reality. They'd been eating bark and leaves and whatever they could get to just survive. So they were really low in energy. I don't remember what the word was, but I couldn't do much, you know. We couldn't speak Cambodian, and I couldn't do medicine, but they gave me a real good job. They gave me a big bucket of homemade Gatorade to try to give as many as one of them would drink it and, you know, help build them up. So I had one little plastic glass, and I carried it around. And usually, you know, these folks, most of them were fairly young. They would be sitting, trying to find some shade and kind of gathered together in little groups. And sometimes nobody would take it, so I had to pass on. But a lot of times, if the first person would take it and drink it, then I could fill up another glass, and each one of them would drink it. So I got to meet most all of them in a way, you know. But I thought later about what Jesus said about giving out a glass of cold water. So I think I got to give out about 700 of them that day. So I was happy with that. In addition, we had doctors on our team, and they could tell pretty well right off which ones of them were the most seriously ill. And so I got to help one of our doctors from down in Texas. We helped load some of them get up on the camp truck. We had straw and mats laying there in the back of the truck, and they could lay on that to take them to the hospital. And this I found out about later. When we were home on our next furlough, I had a call from some friends over in West Alabama that had been my church members when I was in seminary and had pastored their church way down in the piney woods of southwest Alabama. Well, they had moved up to another town, but they called me and they said, Brother Bob said, we saw some pictures from the refugee camp. Said, did you happen to have on a red cap? I said, yes, I bought one at Chaco Springs. They said, well, we saw your picture helping some of the Cambodians get in the truck. So probably the only time I've ever been on CBS. Well, anyhow, I was mainly the driver and help her what I could, and Maxine stayed real busy getting pictures and interviews. And a little bit later, when the Viet Cong Khmer Rouge had to start vacating when the Vietnamese army were chasing them, we actually had to build a separate section in the camp. And Brother Dan Cobb, he and his wife were the ones living down there, and he was the one that helped purchase tarps and plastic and whatever to help build these, places for stay. And then his wife Fan was in charge of the kitchen and with getting the food for him. So he told me later, he said they had to be real careful because this new group coming in had actually probably murdered some of the friends of the first group. So they kept them separated by a pretty good bit, but we still tried to minister to them. And I remember a picture of Maxine interviewing one of the Khmer Rouge. I don't know if he's a general or a colonel, but he was one of their officers. And of course, in the camp, they were very docile, and realized, I think, what they'd done. But anyhow, they were dependent on us to help them. We also tried to, some of our doctors, when they could, because this is way out in the country there in the jungle of Thailand, where Thai people would get sick too, and it was hard for them to get any medical help. So if they had finished rounds at the refugee camp and had some time, they would go out into the villages there in the Thailand area and try to minister to them. But it was a wonderful work, and Dan and some of the folks that worked there regularly witnessed and taught, and they had Bible classes, and there was a great response to the gospel there. We had, I don't know, there was probably at least over 1,000 of the refugees that accepted Christ as their Savior. And I know when I pray for them, try to pray every day around the country, I pray for the, what do I call them, the refugee children of the Lord. And of course, when they moved on to other parts of the world, quite a few of them to America, we're still praying for them that their faith will hold and that it's helped them through this horrible time. But so it was a great ministry, both physically and spiritually. And all of our medical teams, including Penny Shelton, had a great part in it. Our part was basically to observe and maybe help a little bit that we could, and then get the news. And the Commission magazine carried a number of stories that Maxine had written at their request. You know, they wanted this. And we did go to one or two other camps just to observe and maybe get some stories. But Gamput, was that Penny, remember? Yeah, sometimes I can remember, sometimes I can't. So now that was probably 250 miles from our house, but it was well worth taking some time out from our regular work. And maybe I'll add this a little bit, because later on when I talked to our Baptist folks about that and show them pictures, I said, you know, this is kind of general, but I said, if you want to get the most bang out of your buck to give to missions, you need to send it through our Southern Baptist channels. Other mission groups work in refugee camps and other kind of work, but they have all these overhead expenses and travel. I remember when we were working in the refugee camp one time, we stayed in a little motel close by, and there were some nurses there from the International Red Cross, and there was a little swimming pool, and I heard them talking, and they were talking about how much money they got. They paid for their travel, their housing, they paid extra for their hardship work, and they were making a huge salary. This was coming from donations. Our folks were doing it along with our regular work, so it didn't cost Baptists anything extra for our part. The teams that came special, that was they were supported to get their travel. I'm sure they didn't make a lot of money off of it. But think about that. You know, some of our Baptist folks, and I've heard it in Sunday school and so on, they're sending money to other groups, but they could be doing so much more with it by sending it through our channels, because we had our regular salary and some travel built into it for our regular work, and it didn't cost anything extra. So I thought, why, you know, let's try to educate and it's not like you're putting other people down, and we don't want them to think we don't appreciate them, but we're just trying to help do the most work that we can with the money that we give. So I didn't even know about, well, I started out, I was baptized as American Baptist in Nebraska. And Uncle Sam brought me to Alabama, And the Lord led me to a church here near my Army post. And I started going there, and I started learning about two things: cooperative program and Lottie Moon Christmas offering. And I was 18, but that just impressed me. First of all, cooperative program, every church of any size, they can designate through the cooperative program, they have a part in all our work. You don't have to be a mega church to support missionaries. So all these small churches were having a part in the refugee work too. So every Southern Baptist has an active part in supporting our work, no matter how big the church is, if they want to do it. Okay, then I learned about the Lottie Moon offering. And I'd always felt like Jesus was getting the short end of the stick at Christmas time, if you'll let me say it that way. And some of our Thai pastors asked me one day, said, this was later, but it kind of figures in. He said, is it true that Christians in America celebrate Jesus' birthday by giving gifts to each other? They didn't really believe it, but they asked me. They said, the wise men didn't do that. I said, no. And so they pinned me down. They said, is that true? Well, I had to admit that it was true, but that it was kind of like the Thai New Year's when they give love gifts. But what I'm getting around to saying is that the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, since I've been a Southern Baptist, has been one of the most special parts of my life as far as my stewardship goes. And every year when I can send the bigger check I can send, the happier I am. And of course, the Lottie Moon offering was supporting our refugee work too. So, folks, just know that think about Jesus' birthday and what it means, and I think you'll get a lot of joy out of really. I don't know how much you give now, but if you can give more, you'll be real happy with it. Well, that's not too far away from the refugee camp. When Bob asked me if I could talk about the refugee, I said, if you don't mind me wandering off a little bit, but it's really connected, because I don't know in the churches how much was said, but that money you were already giving is what made it possible for our teams to go and for the wonderful work that was able to be done. Thank you very much. Amen. Now, you edit that, son, any way you want to.
That was great, Dad.
I didn't know her finger was in the world.
You didn't know she was coming?
No, I didn't know she was live tech. And I didn't know what she...
What a surprise. What a nice...
You didn't know about any of them came, after they left.
Well, you needed to read Mom's newsletter, apparently.
Well, I don't know.